Multiple silly season dominoes have fallen in NASCAR's Daniel Suarez signed a multi-year contract extension with Trackhouse Racing. Alex Bowman has also signed a multi-year contract extension to return to Hendrick Motorsports through 2026, and NASCAR is interested in racing in New York among different areas across the world. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. Let's first begin by talking about Wendy's, as it was announced Monday that Wendy's is going to sponsor Noah Gragson in this year's Daytona 500. Excited to see that Wendy's is going to sponsor Noah Gragson. This car looks absolutely incredible, looks amazing, and excited to see that Wendy's is going to sponsor Noah Gragson. I still think the car from last year is better, but it still looks really awesome and really good, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Guns N' Roses. As it was announced last night that Guns N' Roses is going to sponsor Erik Jones in the Daytona 500. Guns N' Roses is a legendary band. It's amazing to see that they're going to sponsor Erik Jones. The car looks simplistic, looks really awesome, and excited to see that they'll sponsor Erik Jones in this year's Daytona 500. Absolutely amazing news. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Bristol Truck Race, as they have a title sponsor for the event. It's going to be called the Weather Guard Truck Race on Dirt. Really excited to see the Weather Guard is going to sponsor the truck race at Bristol Dirt. Weather Guard, a company that's been around for many years. Really exciting stuff. Glad to see them sponsor the truck race at Bristol Dirt. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Sugar Land Shires. As it was announced on Monday afternoon and Tuesday morning that they are going to have signed a season-long partnership with JTG Doherty Racing, and they'll have one primary for Ricky Stenhouse Jr. as well. Sugar Land Shires, I believe, sponsored Ricky Stenhouse Jr. quite a few races last year, so really good stuff for sure. Amazing to see, and very happy to see that they will sponsor Ricky Stenhouse Jr. this season. Really exciting news. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Walmart. As it was announced on Monday that, Tuesday morning, that Walmart is going to become a new partner of 23XI Racing in a deal, and is focused on off-track activation with Bubba Wallace. Walmart, one of the biggest companies in the world and in the United States. It's amazing to see her partnering up with 23XI Racing and Bubba Wallace as well. I think it's really exciting stuff. Really great for the sport in general, and very exciting to see that they will sponsor Bubba Wallace and 23XI Racing. Really big stuff. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Craftsman. As it was announced yesterday afternoon that Craftsman will have some new NASCAR truck activation, will include a deal of the race where we'll work with retail partners such as Lowe's to offer a discount on a special tool. It was also announced as well that they'll be basically part of Focus, and it will have social media presence, and also will be working with FS1 and Fox as well. I think this is really good for the sport. Amazing to see that Craftsman is coming back to the Truck Series this year. I think it's really big for the sport in general, and it's amazing to see that they are going to be back. I think it's really huge for the sport. Really fantastic and exciting news, and great to see that they are returning. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Chase Purdy. As Bowman Buggies is going to sponsor Chase Purdy for a majority of races in 2023. Bowman Buggies has been a big partner of Chase Purdy's really since the beginning of his NASCAR career and his ARCA career as well. So it's not a shock or a surprise that they are going to be continuing to work with him for the long term and for the long term period. Great to see that they'll sponsor. They didn't say exactly how many races they're going to sponsor, but it's good to see that Bowman Buggies is going to sponsor Chase Purdy for the foreseeable future and for a majority of races this season. I think it's really exciting stuff. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Daytona purse money. Every single week we have a race. Bob Poggers always puts out the purse money for every single race. And for the Daytona 500, it's $26,934,357. For the Xfinity Series, it's $3,327,595. And for the Truck Series, it's $1,025,847. Daytona 500, you have to put in basically all the charter money and such, is a big reason why it's costing that much. It'll be $1 to $2 million the winner of the Daytona 500 will get for the event. That's the Daytona purses, and really exciting stuff. Glad that Bob always reports on that. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Two Bears, One Cave. As it was announced yesterday that Two Bears, One Cave will be hosted at Daytona International Speedway. This show and podcast is co-hosted by Tom Segura and Bert Kreischer, two of the biggest comedians in the United States and in the world as well. Overall, I think it is absolutely incredible to see that they are doing this podcast. It's a massive podcast that a lot of people know. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Just great to see that they're going to be bringing this podcast out, and I think it'll be fun. I wonder if any drivers will get involved. We don't know for sure if that's going to happen, but still, really excited to see that Bert Kreischer and Tom Segura are bringing their podcasts out. Really exciting stuff. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about qualifying. Now, NASCAR has made a change and update to the rule for qualifying. And according to Bob Pockers, who put the tweet out yesterday, basically qualifying, NASCAR's updated wording in rulebook for driving counter of race direction on a qualifying lap to be specific that the qualifying time would be disallowed. The reason that they have basically updated this rule is due to what Ryan Blaney did in the LA Clash qualifying. He turned around, tried to basically redo his lap after a really, really bad lap, and unfortunately it backfired on Ryan Blaney, and his time was unfortunately disallowed. I'm not shocked or surprised that they've basically gone ahead and changed this, considering basically that ended up happening. I think it's a good decision that they've gone ahead and done that. Overall, I think that's a really good decision that they've gone ahead and done. Well, it's unfortunate for Ryan Blaney because it's bad luck, but it is part of the NASCAR rules, and I think overall it's a really good decision and call, though I don't always agree with NASCAR decisions and calls. I think overall it's a really good decision that they've done that. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Daytona 500. As it was announced Monday that the Daytona 500 has been completely sold out. Absolutely amazing to see that 500 has completely sold. This is the 8th consecutive year the Daytona 500 has sold out, so that's some amazing news. In addition to that, the 2024 date for the Daytona 500 has been officially revealed, and it will be on February 18th. February 18th has a major significance in NASCAR history for many reasons I'm not going to mention here, but I think it's just incredible to see the Daytona 500 has sold out. One of my goals as a fan is to make it out to Daytona one of these years and maybe make it out to watch the Daytona 500. I would love to go Daytona 500 as a fan, and I was able to do that. I think that would be really, really fun, and maybe next year it could happen. We'll have to wait and see. That being said, though, it's amazing to see the Daytona 500 has completely sold out for the foreseeable future, and it will be on February 18th for next year as well. Amazing news, awesome news to hear, and glad to see the Daytona 500 has completely sold out for this year. Really exciting news. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Norm Benning. As it was announced yesterday that Norm Benning will be replacing Johnny Sauter in the Truck Series opener at Daytona. He'll drive the number 46 for Glory to God Racing. First of all, it's disappointing to see that Johnny Sauter is not running the Truck Series opener at Daytona, but I'm not shocked or surprised by the news considering what happened last year at Daytona, where there were some struggles and there were some issues in last year's event. So not surprised or shocked. I know Johnny Sauter wants to race in the Truck Series once again. He said that last year, I think, at Phoenix, but I don't think he really wants to race with Glory to God Racing. Now let's transition over to Norm Benning. Really awesome seeing Norm Benning is getting the opportunity because I think Norm Benning absolutely deserves an opportunity and a chance to race in the Truck Series as much as possible. It's a shame he'll not be driving for his own organization that he owns, but same token, same time, this is going to be a better opportunity for him, though I don't think Glory to God Racing is the best Truck Series team in the world. But that being said, I think it's good that he's going to have an opportunity, but it's a shame that Johnny Sauter will not have the opportunity. That being said, though, glad to see that he'll get the opportunity to drive in the Truck Series with Glory to God Racing. We'll have an attempt to qualify for the Daytona 5 Truck Series opener. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Jason White. As for the first time in NASCAR history, NASCAR's top 3 divisions, there's going to be 2 drivers with the same name competing in the Truck Series opener. Jason White, who will drive the number 1 for Tricon Garage, is a driver who competed in the NASCAR Truck Series back in the 2010s for Joe Danette's organization in the 23 truck. Jason White, the Canadian driver, has raced in the Truck Series in the past and will drive for Ram Brothers Racing in the number 34 truck. I think Jason White in the 1 truck has a really good chance to get in the show. I also think that the 34 driver, the other Jason White, will also have a good chance to make the show. But I think it'd be really good if both drivers did end up making the show, because I think it'd be really good for the sport in general. I hope it does end up happening. I think it's really exciting stuff that we're going to have 2 Jason Whites trying to compete in the Truck Series opener at Daytona. Really exciting stuff, and glad to see that there's a potential for this opportunity to happen. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Noah Gragson. Now, Noah Gragson was speaking to the media yesterday, and he was told basically by Jimmy Johnson before he got in the media, he was told by Jimmy Johnson basically that I was a vanilla driver, and then he told Noah Gragson just to be himself. I'm really glad that Jimmy is allowing Noah Gragson to basically be himself and be his true character, because one thing about Noah Gragson, why Noah Gragson is a fan favorite with many different people, is because of the fact that Noah Gragson basically speaks his mind and is able to speak his mind and basically do whatever he wants and is allowed to have a lot of fun, which is one reason why he's a fan favorite with a lot of people in the garage, and he's a fan favorite with a lot of people as well. So I think that's a huge reason and really great thing for the sport in general, that you have people like Noah Gragson who can be themselves and can be really fun to be enjoyable and can be fun to be around as well. And can also at the same time be very relatable, which I think is really good for the sport. So I think that's really good to see, and happy to see that Noah Gragson is allowed to be himself. I think it's really good for the sport in general, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about the Daytona 500 Command. Now, for this year's Daytona 500, the Command is going to be much different than the past Daytona 500s, where a lot of legendary drivers, past and present, are going to be giving the Command. Richard Petty, Bobby Allison, Bill Elliott, Jeff Gordon, Jimmy Johnson, Dale Jarrett, Kevin Harvick, Kurt Busch, and Joe Logano are all going to give Command for this year's Daytona 500. All from different eras of the sport, the 1960s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, and the 2010s will all be giving the Command. This is a really cool thing they're doing, I think, for the Daytona 500. And, of course, this is the 75th year in NASCAR. So I think, in general, this is really, really huge and really big for the sport in general. And I think this is absolutely amazing to see that they're doing this. I would have to imagine that this will not be the only time that they're doing this. They're probably going to do this a lot of different times throughout the year. That being said, though, I think this is absolutely amazing, really incredible to see, and I think it's incredible that they are going to be doing this. I think this is generally really big for the sport, and I think this is awesome to see that they are going to be doing this. So very excited about this for sure, and amazing to see that they are going to be doing it for this year's Daytona 500. I love that they're doing this, and I hope they do this in a lot of different events this year as well. Really good and exciting stuff, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Hailie Deegan. Now, if you notice on her truck, which got revealed yesterday, one thing I noticed about her truck is that Monster Energy is not on her truck. And I find this very interesting, considering Monster Energy has been a big backer and brand name. When I first noticed was that she didn't have Monster Energy on her Ford Performance fire suit. Then you see the truck get revealed, and it wasn't there. I know that Monster Energy has said that they're going to be backing some of their, basically dropping some of their funding. Of course, they're focusing on 3 of the drivers this year. One for the Xfinity Series, that being Riley Hurst. And then, of course, the other 2 that they're focused on, that being, of course, Tyler Reddick, who will be sponsored by them this weekend in the Daytona 500. And Ty Gibbs, who's sponsored by them for a majority of races this year. So that is kind of not a shock or a surprise. But it's a little shocking in a sense because of the fact that they've been a big backer of Hailie Deegan's really since the beginning of her career. I think that they're taking some of the funding. I wonder if they'll still be with her. I just wonder if they'll be on her truck for last races, though. They were only on her truck for 10 races last year, and she had a lot of different sponsors and a lot of different backing throughout the year. That being said, though, it's definitely a little bit surprising and shocking in a sense, the fact they won't sponsor as much, but it's also not the most shocking and surprising news that has happened. So it's disappointing if Monster Energy isn't back here going to season, but it's also not the most surprising news overall, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Worldwide Technology Raceway. Now, it was basically officially reported by Worldwide Technology Racing themselves and Adam Stern that Worldwide Technology Racing will be bringing back its pre-race Kenny Wallace Midway show for this year's Cup event in June, after 5,000 fans attended this event last year. I was at this event last year where a lot of people show up, like they mentioned, 5,000 people ended up showing up. And I have to say that this was absolutely an incredible event. It was very fun to be at. They had Kevin Harvick out there. They had multiple people out there. They had Chris Rice, I think, up on that stage, if I'm not mistaken. And just a lot of great names and people involved in NASCAR were part of this event. It gave me a throwback back to the old things, the ways they used to do the Home Depot setup, and I love it. They're bringing that back this year. I know they've been trying to get more of this out, and in general, I think this is really huge and really good for the sport in general that they are going to be doing this and bringing back the Midway show. I was a big fan of it last year, was there, enjoyed it for my first ever NASCAR Cup Series race last year, and I really hope that they continue this long-term into the future because in general, I think it'd be really great for the sport. In general, bringing this back is going to be fun. It's going to bring intrigue around the weekend once again. And hopefully, if I do go to Gateway next year, though I'm not confirming that, I will try to be there at this event. So, really exciting stuff. Great news to hear, and amazing to see the World Technology Raceway will be bringing its pre-race show back. I think it's really huge for the sport in general. To be honest, really great to see that they're bringing that back this year. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Ty Majeski. As Ty Majeski's number for 2023 has been officially revealed, he is going to drive the 98 for ThorSport Racing this year. Now we'll get to why that is here in just a little bit, but Road Ranger is also going to sponsor him, I think 4 or 5 or multiple races this year as well. This is a little surprising considering last year he drove the 66 truck. This is a little surprising that he's not in the 66 this year, but the 98 is a big flagship number for ThorSport Racing. That number has basically not won championships yet, but has went on to win a lot of races. And I think Ty Majeski going into this year in the Truck Series, I think he's for sure one of the favorites, if not already the favorite, to win the Truck Series championship because Ty Majeski last year had a major breakout season. He scored 2 wins last year in the Truck Series and could win quite a few races this year. There's a lot of talent moving up this year to Xfinity, Chandler Smith, and John Hunter Nemechek, of course. And I think that he will be one of the favorites throughout the 2023 Truck Series season. But it's very interesting they've gone ahead and chosen the 98 for him instead of the 66 because I think that he is deserving of that 66 number. But still, I think it's really great to see that he'll get the opportunity to drive once again for ThorSport. He deserves the opportunity. He did really good last year. And of course, being a Ford, he's one of the championship favorites in my opinion. I expect him to have a really strong and a really good year. And I think we'll see a very good year from Ty Majeski going into the 2023 NASCAR Truck Series season. I think he'll have a very good season. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Roger Carruth. As his 2023 Xfinity Series schedule has been revealed. He, of course, will drive full-time for GMS Racing in the Truck Series in 2023. But for Xfinity, he's going to run 8 Xfinity Series races with Alpha Prime Racing in 2023. These are the races as follows. His first race will be at Auto Club, then a race at Dover, then a race at Charlotte, then New Hampshire, then a race at Watkins Glen, then at Darlington, then at the Charlotte Roval, and finally at Martinsville. A really good variety of races on the schedule. A couple road courses there, Watkins Glen and the Charlotte Roval. A mile track, a couple mile-and-a-half races or intermediate races, and also some short track races as well. I'm really excited that he'll get more Xfinity Series starts because he did struggle at the beginning of his Xfinity Series career last year in the races that he ran. But by the last 3 races, he was consistently finishing in the top 20. And also, I think long-term, they want to move him up to the Xfinity Series. Chevy does. So I think giving him this experience will also potentially help him in the Truck Series. Yes, of course, I know the Truck Series is different than the Xfinity Series, but I really do think that he will do a good enough job, and I think he'll perform very, very well with this team going into this season. So I am really pumped up to see that he'll be driving for this team this season. I think he's going to do with Alpha Prime Racing. I think he'll do a really good job. I think the goal is to try to finish top 20. I know Alpha Prime Racing going this season, they do have some pretty big ambitions and some pretty big plans going into the season. I really think Roger Carruth will give this team the best runs that he can. I'm excited to see that he's getting the opportunity to drive for the team going into this season. I think he'll do a really exciting job, and glad to see that Roger will be getting some more Xfinity Series starts because I think he'll do a really good job this year with the Alpha Prime team in his select NASCAR Xfinity Series starts, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Connor Jones. As it was announced Monday that Connor Jones has signed a multi-year contract to drive for ThorSport Racing for the next few seasons. He will drive for Thor Sport Racing in 2023 in the number 66 truck for 9 races. That means that Thor Sport will have 5 trucks on the racetrack in 2023 in 9 different races. Those 9 races for Connor Jones are as follows: Martinsville, North Wilkesboro, Gateway, Mid-Ohio, Richmond, IRP, Milwaukee, Bristol, and Phoenix. Now, a lot of you are wondering why Connor Jones is not going to run the full season. Well, Connor Jones is not 18 years old. Connor Jones is 16 years old. But Connor Jones, for those who do not know, he is a very talented up-and-coming driver who's got a lot of potential to win races. And I think this is a really great opportunity for Connor Jones and really gets him some experience in the Truck Series as well. Some drivers don't always need the Truck Series experience, but I think Connor Jones will do very well with that Truck Series experience. Now, one thing to note about Connor Jones is, like I said, Connor Jones is a really talented up-and-coming driver. But I think this has a lot more implications in a good way than people realize this. The fact that he's joining this team really sets up Thor Sport Racing for the long-term future and basically sets Ford in a really good position as well. Bringing a driver like Connor Jones in, a young up-and-coming talent in, I think is really going to help Thor Sport Racing this year and really going to help their organization in a really, really big way. So I think this is a really much bigger announcement out. I think people should be really talking about that, the fact that they brought a driver like Connor Jones in. I think he'll do a very solid and a really good job this season, and I'm definitely excited to see that he's getting the opportunity to drive for Thor Sports. So exciting news for sure, and amazing to see that Connor Jones will get the opportunity to drive for Thor Sport Racing this year. I think he'll do a really solid and a really great job with the team this year, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Auto Club. Now, Adam Stern reported this on Tuesday and Monday evening, I should say, that basically was at Auto Club. And we got more to talk about from Steve Phelps that came out from Adam Stern, but he was asked if NASCAR's lack of an official commitment to the Auto Club change was a sign that it isn't 100% committed yet to building a short track in Fontana. It's fair to say we're evaluating the LA market as a whole. Now, it's already been announced in the last couple weeks that Auto Club will not host any NASCAR racing in 2024 and potentially in 2025 as well. And a lot of people are wondering why this is the case. Well, one of the reasons being is they're trying to build a short track at Auto Club Speedway. However, there's been a lot of problems. They were going to get it done in 2020, but of course the pandemic really played a major factor and a major role in stopping that from really coming into play. And it played a factor why it's not happening. Now, obviously, a lot of fans want this. Some people don't really want this, and trust me, I'd rather not have it as a short track because the racing the last few years has been really, really good, and I think this year's race is going to be really good as well. But like I said, if you want my honest opinion, when it does come to this, it isn't a complete shock or a complete surprise that this basically, they're still evaluating the market. NASCAR has talked about racing in the LA Coliseum, which personally, I don't want to see them do that. I think it'd be a bad decision overall for the sport, and I don't want to see it happen. Regardless, though, it's going to be interesting to watch to see what happens and what NASCAR does decide to do. But overall, I think we'll see what happens long term, and we'll have to watch and see. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Hailie Deegan. Now, Hailie Deegan spoke to Bob Pockrass not too long ago about 2023 expectations, and Bob had asked her about what her goal was for 2023. Hailie Deegan responded to Bob Pockrass and said the goal was to be with a quality team with good equipment for 2023 and be with a fast organization. Hailie Deegan, of course, will be joining Thor Sport Racing in 2023 in the number 13 truck. This is a very quality ride. This will be the best opportunity she has ever had, and she is going to have some pretty high expectations going into the 2023 season because Hailie Deegan, like I mentioned, I think she does have some talent under her, but she hasn't been in the best equipment. And if you look at the last years in the Truck Series for Hailie Deegan, there's no doubt that she has really, really struggled. She hasn't had the greatest performances, but I also don't think the organizations that she's driven for have been the greatest. Look at there's not really been a ton of talent that came out of DJR except Ryan Preece and maybe Taylor Gray, but the rest of people that drove for DJR weren't the greatest in the world. That being said, she's going to be a Thor Sport, and she's going to be teammates with some really talented drivers. Matt Crafton, a 3-time champion. Ben Rhodes, a champion. Ty Majeski, a driver who could win the Truck Series championship this year. She is going to have some pretty high expectations going into the 2023 NASCAR Truck Series season because of the people that she's teaming up with this year. She's going to have some really high expectations, and she is going to be expected to perform at a really high and a really strong level. Luckily for her, I think she's got potential. If you want my expectations, I think she could win one race this year and get quite a few top fives and quite a few top tens. Her goal is to make the playoffs, and she definitely needs to for sure try to make the playoffs this year, because if she can make the playoffs, that'd be really good for her and really good for the sport in general as well. It's going to be fun and interesting to see what happens, but we'll see what Hailie Deegan can do. She's got some high expectations going into the 2023 season. We'll see what Hailie Deegan can do in 2023. She's going to have some high expectations going into the 2023 NASCAR season. Now we'll go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Tony Stewart. As it was announced yesterday that Tony Stewart is going to run the full NHRA season in 2023. He will drive in this basically the Xfinity Series division of the NHRA, the top alcohol dragster for Mick Phillips Racing. Tony Stewart last year competed in one race with Mick Phillips Racing. I think he won one of his preliminary events, but came up very close to winning the race. And Tony Stewart has said they had more fun racing in NHRA than he had racing in anything with fenders, and had more fun racing in NHRA. So he will compete for the full season, and it's a little surprising he's not running for his own organization, because I would have thought maybe he would run for his own organization in the NHRA, but instead he's going to run in top alcohol dragster for Mick Phillips Racing, which is interesting. Tony Stewart, in his first run, like I already mentioned, was extremely competitive. So it's not on the realm of possibility that he could go out there and win. I wouldn't be surprised and shocked if he wins quite a few races this year in the NHRA, and maybe, just maybe, decides to go and win the championship, because I wouldn't be surprised he wins the championship this year. I know some really high expectations for Tony Stewart, who doesn't have a lot of NHRA experience, but if he's as fast as he was at Las Vegas last year in the NHRA, I only can imagine how quick he's going to be throughout the 2023 NHRA season, because like I've already said and mentioned here, I really think he's going to be extremely competitive this year, and I think he'll do an outstanding and a really good job driving for that team, and I think he's going to give the best performance he can, and I think he's going to do an outstanding job. But excited to see that he's getting this opportunity to drive full-time NHRA. Maybe, just maybe, he decides to sell his charter, but seeing Tony Stewart competitive in racing, and you look at the accomplishments, three-time Cup Series champion, championship caliber owner, Indy champion. He could be one of the first few drivers to have an NHRA championship, an IndyCar championship, and also a NASCAR Cup Series championship, which would just absolutely be incredible. That being said, though, I'm excited to see that Tony Stewart's getting the opportunity to compete in the NHRA on a full-time basis. I think he's going to do exciting and a really good job, and I'm pumped and excited to see that Tony Stewart is going to compete in the NHRA in 2023. I think it's really huge for the sport. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of three major stories in today's episode, as we are talking about New York City. Now, Adam Stern put out a tweet on Monday morning after I got done filming Monday's video, and basically says that NASCAR is in active talks to bring a race to the New York City area, per Steve O'Donnell, and they're also looking at possible cup races in Denver, Seattle, Mexico, Canada, and an international series in the Middle East. First, let's talk about New York City. What do they mean by racing in New York City? Well, there's two potential options they could go and race. The first thing that was mentioned in that article was MetLife Stadium, which is still a stadium that's basically racing around this there, or also potentially doing a street race. NASCAR is, I think, looking at what Formula One is doing currently at the moment, and I think they're looking at that incest and growth of Formula One, and they're definitely watching what's going on with Formula One. So there potentially could be another street race in that area. Now, there's also, we'll go to the other options and potential possibilities. You have Denver. Denver's been mentioned multiple times by NASCAR in the past as a potential option. Seattle has been mentioned a couple times. They've looked at the Pacific Northwest. Of course, the Xfinity Series is racing in Portland this year, so that could be a potential option there. Mexico. Obviously, we know the news about Kyle Busch very recently when it comes to Mexico, but you've got the Autodromo Hernando Rodriguez track. They also could race in the streets of Mexico City, but I could see that happen. Canada. If NASCAR is to go back to Canada and potentially race in Canada, I would think that they have a couple options. Canadian Tire or race at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. And if you want my honest and personal opinion, I would rather go to Circuit Gilles Villeneuve and basically race up there than race at Canadian Tire. No disrespect to Canadian Tire, because I think Canadian Tire is a really good track, but I personally think that I'd rather go to Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. The Xfinity Series always put on a really, really great show. And then also to talk about the Middle East, they're wanting the money. It's basically for the money. Every series and every sport, they're looking and trying to cash in on the money, so they're right there. But talk about New York City and a street race. Now, I think they're literally looking at a street race more than anything else. And let me say this when it comes to this. Look, I understand NASCAR wants to do more street racing, but I would rather just wait to see the racing before we start expanding out to areas like New York City and racing there. I think it'd be big if NASCAR raced in New York City, and I think they should try to race in New York City. But if we're talking about doing a street race, we should for sure wait to see what's going on with Chicago Street Course, because I'm not sure the racing is going to be good. And I don't think a street race in New York City is going to be better than Chicago. I just don't think this race is going to be really that good, the street course race. Sure, a lot of people are probably going to show up to the Chicago street course race. But if you want my honest opinion, when it comes to this, I personally do not want to see more street racing on the schedule. I think one street race, because if they want to race and do a street race in New York, personally, you only get one option to do a street race. You can't do 2 or 3. People are already getting street racing. If you want to do a stadium race, MetLife Stadium, I'd have to be for that. That'd be really, really good, and it's absolutely worked. But you would have to maybe do it as an exhibition event and not as a points-paying event unless you did it around the track, which would be like a half-mile track, which would definitely make a lot of sense. Or race in the Meadowlands, perhaps. But you got to go out for the markets, and New York is the biggest market in the United States, so the population is definitely decreasing in New York due to certain reasons. I really do believe that if we race in New York, it would be good. But let's wait to see what happens with Chicago before we decide to expand and go to different areas. Now, going international, that needs to happen. In Canada, Circuit Gilles Villeneuve is where we should go if we decide to expand internationally. That's my opinion, though, and honestly, expansion is definitely important to NASCAR, and I think they are going to expand in the future. I just don't see NASCAR not waiting to expand. But personally, in my opinion, I think we should wait to do expansion and stuff, except we go outside of the country before we just have a street race. So we'll see what happens, and we'll see what NASCAR does decide to do, because they say they want to make the schedule, many changes per schedule in 2024. We'll see what NASCAR decides to do. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode, as we are talking about Daniel Suarez. As it was officially announced yesterday, well, it's earlier today, that Daniel Suarez has signed a multi-year contract extension with Trackhouse Racing and will return to Trackhouse Racing in 2024. Now, the length of the contract that Daniel Suarez got has not been officially announced. He did not disclose that information, but I would have to imagine the deal is probably a 2 to 3 year deal, and this is not a shock or surprise in any way or form. Daniel Suarez, in my opinion, absolutely deserves this extension. While Ross Chastain was definitely the better driver than Daniel Suarez in 2022, Daniel Suarez was really good in 2022. He got quite a few top 5s, quite a few top 10s, could have won a few races last year, did get his first career victory at Sonoma, and ran up front in many races throughout the 2022 season. Could have won Auto Club and made a bad block. Could have won the Coke 600, had the best car in that race, but unfortunately got involved in a wreck. Could have won at COTA, dominated that race. Unfortunately, he ended up getting involved in something that really wasn't his fault and getting trapped back there in the back of the pack. Thank God stage cautions are gone, because that would 100% prevented that situation. And he could have won quite a few races this year and was very close to making it to the round of 8 last year. But unfortunately, just a power steering failure that he had no control of. If he doesn't have that power steering issue, he goes on to make it to the round of 8 pretty easily over guys like Kyle Larson and Chase Briscoe. But Daniel Suarez is a long-term future for Trackhouse, and it gives Trackhouse really good stability long-term as well to have a driver like Daniel Suarez stick around long-term. And he also brings really good sponsorship and funding, and I expected he was going to get extended. Don't get me wrong, I really expected it. I know things can change quickly, but when Suarez has been the face of this organization and the face of the team and brings in the sponsorship funding from companies like Coca-Cola, among other companies helping out the team, and having Pitbull around, and I think a big reason why Pitbull is with Trackhouse Racing is because of Daniel Suarez. And I look at Daniel Suarez long-term in the next few years, and I think that Daniel Suarez is going to have some pretty big seasons coming up here in the next couple seasons. I think Suarez could win a race or 2 next year, which I think he'll win at least 1 race at COTA. That's my prediction where I think he'll win. And I think that Daniel Suarez is just, in general, going to have a very strong and a really good season. I think he has a fantastic year with Trackhouse Racing. I think he gets a win. I think he makes the playoffs. And I think that Daniel Suarez makes the round of 12 this year. I really think he's going to have a big year. I think I've already mentioned I could see Daniel Suarez picking up multiple victories this Cup Series season. But now we talk about the other teammate, Ross Chastain. I think Ross Chastain's not far away from also getting a contract extension. I know that his market and basically his potential of going to teams has kind of skyrocketed, and some teams are probably looking at him, including Stewart Racing. But I think that if I'm Ross Chastain, I'm sticking with Trackhouse Racing long term because he nearly won the championship with this team last year. And if I was Trackhouse, I would not want to lose Ross Chastain with how good of a driver he is. Even if the team does take a little bit of a step back this year, I still think Ross Chastain is going to be a championship contender. And I think he's going to make the Final Four again this season. So I would have to imagine that they're going to get this done pretty soon, and I would have to imagine it in the next couple of weeks, probably before the end of February, probably in early March or an early portion of the season. We're probably going to find out about Ross Chastain getting a contract extension, but we're just going to have to wait and see. But transitioning back over to talk about Daniel Suarez, he 100% deserves this extension. He's performed in a very big way and really, really good. And I think that 2023 is going to be a really strong year for Daniel Suarez. So I'm excited to see that he's returning to Trackhouse Racing. He absolutely deserves this extension, and he absolutely killed this. So I think he's really deserving of it, and I'm excited to see that Daniel Suarez is returning to Trackhouse Racing in 2023. Really excited about it and really looking forward to this season for Daniel Suarez. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we are talking about Alex Bowman. As it was also announced this morning that Alex Bowman has signed a multi-year contract extension with Hendrick Motorsports. This contract is going to go through the 2026 season, so this is a 3-year extension for Alex Bowman. It was also announced today as well that Ally has signed a contract extension with Hendrick Motorsports through the 2028 season. So it's very possible that Alex Bowman could be with Hendrick Motorsports at least through the 2028 season. This is absolutely huge for Hendrick Motorsports because this sets up Hendrick Motorsports for the long-term future. You've got William Byron with Hendrick Motorsports through 2025. You've got Alex Bowman and Kyle Larson who now have contracts through the 2026 season, and Chase Elliott set through the 2027 season. So that is really good for the long term for Hendrick and gives Hendrick Motorsports the long-term stability. Now let's talk about Alex Bowman. I know last year for Alex Bowman in 2022 was not a very good season. It was just a struggling season in general. He did, I believe, end up making it to the round of 12, but unfortunately got eliminated in the round of 12 after concussion issues that came into play in his summer in 2022 was absolutely horrendous. But Alex Bowman, in my opinion, absolutely deserves this extension. He's got 7 NASCAR Cup Series victories, and outside of 2018, he has scored a victory every single year from 2019 up to 2022. And has our wins in William Byron, and has at times been a pretty solid driver. And he had a really good start to the season with a great run in the Busch Light Clash. And I think with Blake Harris coming on as a crew chief this year, I really think that Alex Bowman could have a big year. And it wouldn't surprise or shock if he ends up making the playoffs this year. And for Hendrick to get this extension done as quick as they already have, in general, I think is really good for Hendrick Motorsports long term. And you want to keep Alex Bowman around. He's got that Ally back, and Ally's a huge fan of Alex Bowman. Plus, they are saying at Hendrick Motorsports through 2028. So I wouldn't be surprised, like I mentioned, in the next few years if Alex Bowman gets an extension through 2028. Now, Alex Bowman does have a few years now to really prove himself, and I think he's already proved himself, but hasn't had that big year since 2021, though I do think this could be a big year for Alex Bowman going into 2023. And this gets that monkey off the back for Alex Bowman as well, where now he doesn't have to basically worry about contract talks and contracts. Now he can just focus on racing for the next few years and can go out and put on some really strong and really good performances with Hendrick Motorsports, which is something I think that he really wants to do this year. He wants to run really, really good, do a really good job with the team, and wants to have a really great season with the Hendrick Motorsports group. So this is really good for Alex Bowman long term. Going into the season, I think Alex Bowman could win a couple races with Hendrick Motorsports, could win 2 or 3. I think he's going to win 1 race this year, but I think he shockingly misses the playoffs this year with how competitive the field is going to be. I think there'll be some growing pains with Blake Harris this year, and the field, I think, is going to be even more competitive this year than it was last year. But like I've already mentioned and already said here, I think Alex Bowman is going to have a fantastic year and perform really good. And with Alex Bowman and Daniel Suarez now both have their contracts done, this really puts into shape this rest of the silly season. Ross Chastain, I think, is going to return to Trackhouse next year. Denny Hamlin, he's in a contract year, but I have to imagine Hamlin's going to get extended pretty soon. I would have to also imagine that you're going to see Truex either retire, come back in 2024. And I think in general, silly season is going to be a lot quieter this year than it has been in previous years. The big question is going to be who's going to go to the 4, potentially to 10, because Eric Almirola could retire at the end of the season as well and lead the sport in general. And then, of course, what's going on with front row over there. Does Zane Smith go full-time in Cup, or does Todd Gilliland return? That's one thing to watch as well. But going back and talking about Hendrick Motorsports in general, the fact that they've got everything set up long-term with stability in general, I think is great for the team. They all are really talented drivers who really have shown their potential. And in general, I think this is really good for NASCAR to have all Hendrick Motorsports set. And it's good, at least we know with the contracts, because compared to a lot of other teams, Hendrick does reveal their contracts, which is really good to see, because the fact that they can reveal their contracts really helps a little bit less speculation. And we now know for sure how long the deal is for all 4 drivers, and Hendrick is set long-term, which I think all 4 drivers are really good. All of them can win championships. 2 of them have already won championships, and I can see Alex Bowman and William Byron winning a Cup championship before all is said and done. But I think this is really awesome for the sport in general, and amazing to see that we have Alex Bowman returning to Hendrick Motorsports through the next few years. So, that is today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Notifications on so you're notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links are lower that, and comment below your thoughts below on today's video. What are thoughts about Alex Bowman returning to Hendrick Motorsports through 2026? Let me know in the comments below. And what are thoughts about Daniel Suarez returning to Trackhouse for the next couple years? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on my channel, or later tonight, we're going to be doing reactions to Daytona qualifying. That'll go up on my channel later tonight. Tomorrow on the channel, we'll have a paint scheme video with all the paint schemes for Daytona 500 and reactions to Daytona qualifying. And then on Friday, we'll have multiple videos on the channel, a NASCAR news video, a lot of stuff for Media Day, among other things as well. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.